Online sleuths tend to get a bad rap, especially those who go searching for the answers to an unsolved crime, and it's not entirely unwarranted. Social media can help close tricky cases, but it can also hinder them, too, drowning police in unhelpful tips or causing difficulties for a completely unrelated party. Still, there have been several instances in which average, everyday people with an interest in crime have been able to provide answers to a long unsolved mystery. Join us for today's episode as we examine 3 examples of missing persons cases solved by online sleuths. Linda was shy, clever, and hardworking. She was a waitress at a local fast food restaurant, had a keen interest in rock music, and had grown up in Akron, Ohio, where she was still living in 1974. The youngest of 3 siblings, she shared an apartment with her older brother and sister and their stepfather at the time of her disappearance. Those who knew Linda found it difficult to reconcile that she would abandon her life and run away from home. But for years, that was the story her stepfather and investigators told. Linda was last seen by her siblings on August 31st, 1974. That evening, she attended a concert with her boyfriend, Steve Wilson, in Cleveland, and in the small hours of September 1st, the pair returned to Akron, where Linda dropped Steve off and then went home. Notably, her stepfather Byron was the only person to see the 17-year-old upon her return. He would later state that the pair argued over the late hours that she would come and go from the house, and their argument escalated to such a degree that Byron threw Linda out of the house. She left the apartment and did not return. She was never seen again. Though the family were aware of Byron's bad temper, they did not believe anything was amiss, as he and Linda did not seem to be on bad terms before she disappeared. She was not immediately reported missing, because her loved ones assumed she was staying with friends, but upon calling around and finding out that nobody had seen the 17-year-old, she was reported missing on September 2nd. Unfortunately, Linda's disappearance was largely dismissed by law enforcement, who believed that she was a runaway teen who'd stormed off after a family dispute, and would return when she ran out of money or shelter. Notably, Linda's car was still at the apartment. As a result of the police's lack of interest in the case, her disappearance was largely overlooked by the media, and for years, her disappearance remained a mystery. Less than 6 months later, on February 5th, 1975, partial skeletal remains were discovered on the banks of Rocky River in Strongsville, Ohio. Today, the area is part of the Millstream Run Reservation. The body was missing a jawbone, and there was little physical evidence that could be recovered by investigators. All law enforcement had to go on were the body's vitals. It was determined that the remains belonged to a white female around the age of 20, while her cause of death was established as a gunshot wound to the head. It was initially believed that the body belonged to Patricia Hearst, an actress and member of the wealthy and influential Hearst family. In 1974, she was kidnapped by the Siamese Liberation Army, and by the time the remains were found, it was unclear if she was alive or dead. Eventually, law enforcement ruled Patricia out of the investigation, as she was located alive 18 months after she went missing. Notably, Linda's brother, Michael, saw a news report about the recovery of the remains in Strongsville. He immediately called the Strongsville police force to tell them about his missing sister. But his theory was immediately dismissed. Authorities claimed that the body was too tall and too old to be Linda, and the Strongsville Jane Doe was later buried in an unmarked grave in Memorial Gardens, Highland Hills, Ohio. For decades, what had become of Linda remained unknown. Her family longed for answers, stuck in a hellish limbo where they wished to find some sense of closure, but could not. It wouldn't be until 2016. The 17-year-old's case would see movement again, when Christina Skates, a Cleveland State University student, accidentally stumbled onto it while doing her genealogy research. Combing through cemetery records, Christina became aware of the unidentified skeletal remains in Memorial Gardens, and subsequently requested access to the police files and autopsy records, feeling deeply saddened that a young woman had died and her case had been promptly forgotten. After doing further research, Christina laid out everything she knew in a Reddit post where famed forensic artist Carl Koppelman caught wind of the case and drew up a reconstruction of the victim using images of her skull. Despite his efforts, The reconstruction struggled to gain any popular traction, and it largely went unnoticed by the public outside the sleuthing community. Carl Koppelman is a highly regarded volunteer forensic artist who works as an accountant by day and was never professionally trained in art. Shortly after the Strongsville Jane Doe caught his attention, he was sought out by law enforcement, who wished to ask him about working with them on another case, and Carl decided to ask about the unidentified woman buried in a cemetery in Highland Hills. Around the same time, Christina sent an inquiry to law enforcement about the remains. She specifically asked why they did not appear on Cuyahoga County's list of unidentified remains, which was a crucial misstep by the police. Because she was not in the databases, nobody knew of her existence, and she could not be ruled out or matched to missing person cases. In the following months, new images of Jane Doe's skull were sent to Carl, who worked on another reconstruction, while authorities uncovered that a spelling error had prevented the remains from being added to online databases. This error was subsequently corrected, and the body was submitted to the NamUs database, among others. Following this, the case unraveled quickly, as online sleuths suggested the remains were those of Linda, 17, and missing from Akron, Ohio, since September 1st, 1974. Shortly afterwards, Akron police reached out to authorities in Cuyahoga County, and the initial dental records seemed promising. A full exhumation was performed in October of 2017, so that DNA could be pulled from the remains, while DNA swabs were taken from Linda's siblings, Michael and Cheryl, for comparison. On June 29, 2018, it was confirmed that the body discovered in Strongsville, Ohio, in February of 1975, was indeed that of Linda Paganer. The remains were returned to the family for a proper burial, and Michael reportedly met with Christina Skates to give her his thanks for her hard work in bringing the case back to the attention of investigators. He later told the media, "I thought it was a dream. I thought this day would never come. I figured I'd die wandering." Though Linda has been found, her death remains unsolved. Some of her family members believe that their stepfather, Byron, may have been involved in her disappearance. Police consider him a person of interest, but he died in 1990 and cannot be questioned. Notably, Michael has stated that the pair were close, and he does not believe that their argument that night was anything more than a dispute between parent and child. Investigators are also keen to trace and speak with Steve Wilson, Linda's boyfriend at the time. Though he is not a suspect, he was one of the last people to see the 17-year-old alive, and is thus considered a key witness. Sergeant Jeff Smith with the Akron Police investigated Linda's case and stated that there was little to go on at the time of her disappearance, and even less now that Byron has died. He firmly believes that if the case had happened today, it would have been quickly solved thanks to modern technology and forensic advancements. He told reporters anyone with information about Linda's case, or the whereabouts of her boyfriend in 1974, Steve Wilson can contact the Cleveland Metro Parks Police Department at 440-331-5530. Callahan. On the afternoon of June 26, 1995, two men were discovered dead in their Volkswagen van, having crashed into a set of trees on U.S. Route 58 West in Emporia, Virginia. Neither party present inside the vehicle was wearing a seatbelt, and it was later determined that this contributed to their deaths. The driver of the van was identified as Michael Hager, but the passenger could not be ID'd. On his person were two Grateful Dead tickets, one for June 24th and another for June 25th, several quarters, and a yellow Bic lighter. Near the scene, or possibly in John Doe's pocket, depending on the source, a letter was also recovered. At first, it seemed like a promising lead. It read, "Jason, sorry we had to go. See you around. Call me," followed by a phone number, and it was signed by Caroline T. and Caroline O. The letter also had on it a cartoonish drawing of a person, speculated to be Jerry Garcia, the Grateful Dead's lead vocalist. Unfortunately,